Hello everyone, welcome to week 3 of ADM 630. This week we are covering material from chapter 2 in the Macmillan text and from pages 37 to 43 from an SPSS user manual. And this area covers basically the same content as chapter 2 regarding variables, but just like the way that it's addressed in the SPSS reading. I think you'll find this week's overview very helpful as you work through MRP1. Remember that in MRP1, your task is to clearly identify your research topic and provide a statement of the research problem, along with a research question and a list of variables along with a brief explanation of those variables. Try not to get hung up in getting it just right. My job is to help you improve and massage your ideas through each MRP submission. So this week our broad topics are research problems, quantitative research problems, including variables and hypotheses, and qualitative research problems. So research problems can be demonstrated through generally one or two sentences where we address the goal, purpose, and overall direction of our study. A research problem statement implies that there's some possibility of engaging in an empirical investigation to uncover some aspect of the research problem. It provides a focus for our study, it identifies a need for the research, and it provides a very concise overview of the research project. There are two ways for stating a research problem. One is by addressing the problem itself. So we might talk about how there's a problem in an educational setting, let's say bullying, and we'll put it out there very broadly. But there are also then more specific research statements where we might say that we have a specific issue with bullying, let's say in a sixth grade classroom setting. And we have a problem with bullying between female students and male students within a particular class even. And so a research statement gets a lot more focused and direct in providing guidance both for the reader of our research study, but also for us as researchers. So a couple of examples. A general research problem. And you can see it. I'm not going to read it out to you. To me, that'd be just like if we were in the classroom and I'd be reading a slide to you. So I'm just going to leave it there for you to look at. You can see it's broad. But then the next two examples are more specific and provide a very direct focus for what's going to be investigated. Now, as I mentioned a moment ago, we need to make sure that our research statement provides some direction and help us identify a clearly researchable problem. And you can see here these are some examples of researchable problems. In these statements, which are listed as research questions, which we'll get to in this presentation as well, in this video, you can see there's a lot of specificity. We're looking at and we're identifying exactly what's going to be measured and the target populations that are going to be addressed to the study. Now, some examples of non-researchable problems. You can see they're very vague and basically imply some level of value that's being expressed in these questions. Anything where we're vague or we're expressing value, well, those really aren't researchable. We're either expressing our own value or inferring that a reader should hold a particular value. We want to avoid those. Again, don't get too hung up about whether your question or research statement right now kind of goes in this direction. Get your ideas out there first for MRP1 and let me offer you some feedback. Generally speaking, our research, as we addressed in week 2, our research is divided into two broad areas, either quantitative or qualitative. As you can see, quantitative problems are very specific. They are generally outcome oriented. and address specific variables. On the other hand, qualitative problems are much more general. They are evolving. So as qualitative researchers, we leave that space open to allow that research process to shift and change. So some common sources between this and the next slide. For the purpose of the MRP this semester, I suggest choosing a topic situated in your own interests, your own experiences, or your own career goals. Don't worry about attempting to apply theory or attempting to replicate a previous study or seeking to clarify some contradictory findings you've seen in multiple studies. I really want you to think about identifying a problem of interest, or a topic of interest rather, or a research problem that's based in your own experiences, your own interests, or your own career goals. In quantitative research, the research problem identifies three specific elements. The statement will, right from the outset, provide a glimpse of the research design, although at this point in the semester, we've not gotten into research design other than there being quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods approaches. So we're not going to worry about getting into this level of detail for MRP1. I want us to keep it broad, but I do want you to try to work towards some area of focus for your topic. But don't worry about these specific elements just yet. We'll continue to work on this and refine it as we move through the semester. One thing that we do want to address in MRP1 are variables. And so a variable is simply a label or a name that represents a concept or a characteristic that varies. It's something that we can measure. And as I'll address at the end of this video today, I want to make sure that we're not getting too caught up in trying to list out every possible variable at this point. I want you to think very broadly in terms of what you could measure to help address your research problem and answer your research question. Everything needs to be operationalized when it comes to identifying variables. Again, we're going to be refining this project as we move through the semester. So don't get too caught up right now as you address your variables in MRP1. I do want you to offer a definition of what that variable is, but don't get too deep into it yet. Offer your conceptualization at this point. But as we move through the term, we're going to refine that so that any definition that we offer, whether conceptual or operational, is based in existing scholarship. There are three types of variables in quantitative research: independent and dependent variables, extraneous and confounding, and then continuous and categorical variables. When I was first introduced to statistics as an undergraduate student, I had a hard time differentiating between independent and dependent variables. I just kept getting hung up on it. Well, here's one way that made sense for me. Dependent variables can't do anything on their own without help from the independent variable. That's an incredibly simplified perspective, and there are some issues with it, but if you struggle with independent versus dependent variables, this simplified definition can be helpful. It's something that I've shared with students previously, and students have told me at the end of a semester or at the end of their thesis, they found this to be a helpful way to start to make sense of dependent versus independent variables. When it comes to extraneous and confounding variables, a researcher typically discovers that these are present through the data analysis process. With continuous and categorical variables, something to keep in mind is that scales are generally sequential, rising from low to high in whole numbers. And so that those become continuous. Categorical variables are those things that represent categories. In the SPSS readings, those are referenced as nominal variables, those things to which we give names. or categorical variables are often represented as named variables. Categorical variables could be gender, male, female, transgender. Here again are some other examples of continuous and categorical variables. When we get into continuous variables, again, it's important to keep in mind that continuous variables are represented by integers. But one thing also to remember is that continuous variables can later be represented as categorical variables. So you can see the example of test scores in the second sub-bullet here on this screen. Test scores are continuous, but we can group test scores into ranges to represent letter grades. Those letter grades then become categorical variables. But one thing to note is that we cannot go backward. From once something is represented as categorical or we collect data as categorical, we cannot turn it into continuous variable data. So to summarize quantitative research problems, the research problem should be researchable, it should be important, and we demonstrate that importance by other folks saying we need to know more about this issue. The research problem statement should specify the sample, specify key variables, and be very clear. Again, when it comes to the MRP project, we are going to be working on this together as we go through the term. So for MRP1, focus on getting your ideas out there. I'll offer the feedback to help you improve it as we move through the term. Hypotheses represent tentative statements of the expected relationships between two or more variables. Yes, I did just read the PowerPoint to you, but I think that's such a clear definition that I want to make sure that I reinforce that. A hypothesis is simply a statement representing the expected relationships between two or more variables. Hypotheses in quantitative research help provide focus to our study, and they demonstrate what exactly we'll be testing once we have our data. Here you can see some reasons for using hypotheses. Again, it's to provide us a framework so we know exactly what we're doing with our study. Two types of hypotheses, inductive and deductive. I think that Macmillan does a really nice job in Chapter 2 of providing a clear explanation of these. Most of the hypotheses that you're going to see as you do your library searches for MRP are going to be statistical hypotheses. Some criteria for evaluating hypotheses. They're always stated in a declarative form. Any hypothesis has to be testable, and a demonstration of that testing needs to be shown through the final reporting. And it should be clear and concise. So qualitative research focuses on essential phenomena being investigated. So you see some examples of issues and also some examples of processes. We're going to get into a lot more detail and qualitative after midterm. So I just want to really just provide a very broad overview, but I'm going to just jump over these couple of slides. Again, these slides are being posted to Canvas, so you've got them for your research along with my notes. And I want to just address MRP, but I'm going to record a separate little video so that I don't go too long and get cut off by the computer. So check out the next video for an overview of MRP1.